Hello and welcome to CyNam 20.3. My name's Chris Dunning-Walton. I am one of the directors of CyNam, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you here to our final virtual event of 2020, where we'll be exploring the theme of staying ahead of cyber criminals. The cyber crime activity out there costs the global economy about $11 million per minute, which is a truly phenomenal number. And the people we're going to be speaking to and the companies we're going to be hearing from today are out there mitigating that cyber threat. So we're really thankful to everybody that's signed up online, and a massive thank you to two particular individuals, Claire Bourne, who's worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make today a reality. So a massive thank you to Claire, and also to Madeline Howard, who's also worked incredibly hard to make today a reality. So thank you both. CyNam is a community interest company that's been set up to support and champion the local cyber tech community in Cheltenham and Gloucestershire. We are also a UK cyber cluster and a branch of CySec. We're very proud to be supporting a number of initiatives, including the Golden Valley development and Hub 8, which is a purpose-built cyber tech innovation space in the heart of Cheltenham. Really keen for you all to get involved today. You can do. We have a number of social media platforms you can get involved with using the hashtag CyNam203, and also check us out at cynam.org for our website. We have a fantastic agenda today, and a big thank you to all our speakers. We'd like you to get involved throughout the presentations as well, especially during the break and our breakout sessions. And we've got live Q&A at the end for the panel. So please do pose your questions to the team with your name so we can mention you when we are asking our questions at the end. So please do get involved as well. A massive thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, to Ripjar, who are our gold sponsor. We will be hearing from them today about all the interesting things that they're doing. But thank you so much to Ripjar and the team there for being our gold sponsor for this afternoon. And also to our other sponsors, BAE Systems, who are our silver sponsor, and also Sopra Steria, who are our bronze sponsor. Again, they've been our bronze sponsor for all three of our events this year, so thank you to them. We're beaming live from the DRPG studios, so thank you to them. And we've got a number of other sponsors there, so Sygenta, Gemba Advantage, CyberVardis, and Synologic. Some of those we will be hearing from again later on today, but thank you so much. Our academic sponsor for 2020 is Glos College, and they're doing some fantastic work in this space. Thank you to them. And our industry sponsors throughout 2020 have been Hazelwoods, Capita, and BPE Solicitors, so thank you to them. All of your support makes CyNam what it is. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you to all our sponsors. Today's audience, very pleasing to see so many different people from so many different places as well. It's not just for the local community, CyNam, but also now reaching out across the nation, and also some global audience members as well. So thank you so much for joining us. You can continue the conversation, get involved on our Slack channel. We'll send you all of the information on how to be a part of that CyNam community on Slack as well, if you want to be involved. So please do email us, and we will email you back with how to get involved on Slack. But that's it from me. All that's left to do is to hand you over to our fantastic host today, Reid Darby. Reid, welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of this again today.
Chris, it's such a privilege to be back, and we are in for a great show tonight. So, folks, the cyber sector is really stepping up against cybercrime, and it's such a big challenge for us. And coming up in the programme, we're going to be looking at the nature of cybercrime, who does it, the dynamics that drive it, and we'll look at threat intelligence, and then have a deep dive into ransomware. So a lot to look forward to. First, in the opening session, we've got a real treat for you. I'd like to introduce you to Jeremy Annis, CEO and CTO of Ripjar, and Don Smith, Director of the Counter Threat Unit at SecureWorks. They're going to be talking about how they are transforming threat intelligence at Ripjar. Jeremy, good to see you. Over to you.
Hi there. Thanks, Reid and Chris, for that introduction. Yeah, my name's Jeremy Annis. I'm the CEO and the CTO of Ripjar, a local startup, technology startup based in Cheltenham. I'd like to sort of say thank you very much for welcoming us here to CyNam, and hello to people that know me, and hello to the people that don't know me as well. And welcome to my sort of fireside chat. Thank you, CyNam, again. CyNam has been great for the local community in Cheltenham, but also it's probably worth noting that it's been a fantastic contributor to the wider technology ecosystem in the UK as well. So I'm joined today by one of Ripjar's customers, Don Smith from SecureWorks, and I'll introduce him shortly, actually, towards the end of my presentation. So today I'm going to talk about Ripjar, who we are, what we do, and where we've come from. And then secondly, I'd like to talk you through a few examples of intelligence generation that Ripjar's been involved in over the years. I thought it'd probably be a good place to start with sort of our mission, so that everybody understands what Ripjar is all about. And when we set Ripjar up, our goal was to help governments and organisations detect and investigate threats from criminal activity in any form whatsoever. And there's clearly lots of different types of criminality around the world, and we're here today to talk about cybercrime. But briefly, Ripjar also has technology that we use to detect fraud, to work against financial crime, to analyse international watch lists and sanctions and more, as well as cybercrime. So I guess if we put crime and internet together, we get cybercrime, and ultimately, it's any crime that happens on the internet. And I thought it was interesting to observe that COVID is essentially accelerating the digital transformation of the economy and having a huge impact on all of our lives, which is why we're all clearly dialing into this session today. And my hunch as well is that it's also creating a step change in criminality, forcing more criminal behaviour to occur online too. So it's worth asking, I think, for cybercrime, are there actually zero consequences for the criminals in cybercrime, because so few of them seem to get caught? And we'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation as well. But ultimately today, it's so easy for criminals to hide their tracks using Tor or any other sort of obfuscation techniques. And if you could get away with it, why wouldn't you? So at Ripjar, we've now deployed our technology platform, Labyrinth, into countries all over the world, customers ranging from tier 1 banks to governments to large multinational corporations. Our technology is a blend of data fusion and enterprise knowledge management, all backed up with our own proprietary artificial intelligence and natural language processing stack. We've recently received a Series B funding round from Longridge Capital, an East Coast private equity firm in the US. That's going to fuel our expansion over the next 18 months, which is really exciting, I think, for the local community in Cheltenham. We scale our business through partners such as Accenture and Dow Jones. And during the lockdown period as well, we were awarded the Technology Pioneer accolade from the World Economic Forum, which was quite amazing and actually quite unexpected. And previous alumni of this award have been Google, Twitter, and Palantir Technologies. So it puts us in sort of pretty illustrious company. I'm sure you'd agree. And so, where do we come from? And how did we get here today? So Ripjar, as I say, is a technology startup based in Cheltenham, and we were founded by 5 engineers from GCHQ, I think 7 years ago to this month, actually. And it's been a pretty roller coaster of a ride over those 7 years. There's been blood, sweat, tears, lots and lots and lots of fun. And we've gone from a small shed surrounded by sheep deep in the heart of Gloucestershire countryside to having a thriving business with customers all over the globe. And during our time, we've seen 3 changes of Prime Minister, we've nearly seen Brexit, we've nearly seen the back of Donald Trump, and now we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And, the journey that we've been on over this last 7 years has at times felt a little bit like an episode from the TV show Silicon Valley. So, for example, our first support call from our first financial services customer, who we gained in 2014, they rang up and they said, my Ripjar isn't working. And we had no idea what they were talking about at the time. And then ironically, the second support call that we got from the same customer a few days later was a complaint that they couldn't remove an explicit animated GIF from the Ripjar dashboard in their reception, where they just recently had some visitors. So we've had some very strange support calls over the years. In 2015, we took our first funding from a London-based billionaire, and we found out later that he was really disappointed to learn that we didn't have a helicopter landing pad on the top of Eagle Tower in the middle of Cheltenham. I think they might be building one, I'm not sure. But on a more serious note, during this time, we've done work that we're all immensely proud of. We've helped to protect the nation from the threat of terrorist propaganda and hate speech. We've given governments tools to metricate and understand the impact of policy decisions, which, if anybody knows how the government works, is unheard of in policy. We've gone through the typical startup pivot at least once, possibly more times. And in 2017, we created Labyrinth with Don in partnership with SecureWorks. We've been invited to the Houses of Parliament, Buckingham Palace and Number 10. We've done live BBC radio and television interviews. And then perhaps one of the proudest moments that we've got is in 2018, where we were shouted out by Theresa May at Davos in her speech, where she said British-based companies like Ripjar are pioneering the use of data science and artificial intelligence to protect companies from money laundering, fraud, cybercrime and terrorism. And it's a shame Boris has got his hands full at the moment, otherwise we'd hopefully be getting a shout out from him. So we've now grown from those 5 people in the shed to over 70 people in 3 offices throughout the UK. We've had 9 babies, 6 marriages, and we've got an awesome team who I'm absolutely thrilled to say I'm really proud of. We have a culture, we have traditions, and perhaps most importantly, we've maintained a really strong sense of mission that we actually learned at GCHQ. And then I think I'm allowed to do a slight plug here, but our recent investment clearly means that we're hiring. And I'd just like to say, if you've got a passion for technology, want to be part of a fast-paced startup and work with some amazing people, then please visit the careers page at ripjar.com. And given the current environment, we're hiring fully remotely as well. So what have we learned in our time at Ripjar? Over the next few slides, I'm going to use 3 case studies to show that the old axiom is actually true, that knowledge genuinely is power. It's not enough to just have data. We've got to make sense of it. We've got to transform it. And ultimately, knowledge is what helps us make decisions. And at Ripjar, we try to empower decision makers to be more efficient in their jobs and more effective in the outcomes that they communicate to their stakeholders. And clearly, there's lots of challenges in getting this right. We have to get the right data. We have to get it to the users on time. We have to analyze it effectively and summarize it efficiently. We've discovered that automation is key to solving all of these challenges, and we've used automation in these particular case studies as well. So the first study, the first analysis that I'm going to talk you through here is tracking Daesh propaganda online. As I'm sure you all know, that Daesh is a terrorist group. And one of the key things about the Islamic State, as they used to be called, and ISIL, was their ability to produce masses of online content to promote their message of fear and hate. And some of this stuff is really nasty, and there's been a coordinated worldwide effort to reduce the harm from this kind of propaganda. And you can see some of the imagery that was put out onto the internet by this group here. In 2016, we developed a monitoring system using artificial intelligence to track Daesh propaganda around the internet in real time. So every blog, video, magazine, audio clip, or text snippet that was pushed out by Daesh was picked up by us, tracked and monitored to see how long it was up on the internet for and what the potential impact would have been on people seeing it. So the graph on the left is showing the accounts created on a daily basis by Daesh as they try to avoid being shut down by social media platforms and other providers. And on the right, we're seeing the average lifetime of a media item that was pushed out by Daesh. And you can see there's some pretty stark changes in that graph. And in October, you can see there's just over 350 accounts created on a daily basis. And then you can also see in November on the lifetime of a media item that it reduces to mere days from the more than 50 days that it was might have been available for in August. Now, this is a set of knowledge that we gained through our monitoring system that coincided with the invasion of Mosul, where basically the coalition forces invaded Mosul and massively reduced Daesh's ability to promote and push out online media. And at the same time, we also found out that the US Cyber Command were busy hacking Daesh, degrading their propaganda efforts at the same time. And this is just a really interesting example of the physical and cyber effects playing out concurrently at the same time, and the fact that we could monitor it in real time. It was pretty cool. So in this example, we're looking at the impact, we're using the same technology to look at the impact of automated propaganda from bots during the German federal election. And this happened in 2017. And so we used similar technology to do the same tracking, but here we had to build a bot detection algorithm that used machine learning to understand the differences between whether an online account was actually a real person or whether it's actually synthetic. And we found extensive automated activity that was ultimately trying to influence millions of people's opinions online against the current Chancellor, Angela Merkel, or against the EU. And this picture in the middle here shows 4 clusters of different bots. Now, there aren't any prizes for guessing the culprits here. There aren't any prizes for guessing the culprits, and we can see 4 different botnets on this picture. And on the far left here, in the pink, we've got a lot of content that was pushed out and classified by our technology as pro-Russia sentiment. And then in the middle, we've got anti-Merkel sentiment and anti-EU sentiment. And then the 2 pictures on the right-hand side are the Alternative for Germany political party, which is a far-right party, and more sentiment around pro-far-right propaganda. So this is all tinged as well with a pretty unpleasant anti-immigrant narrative too. And then finally, which I think you've just seen this slide, but finally it's kind of worth mentioning the US election that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. In 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the idea that Russia tried to influence the election of Donald Trump in some manner. And ultimately, Russia created multiple personas or accounts, and most famously the account called Guccifer2, which is in the middle there, which was responsible for leaking a massive email archive that it had obtained from cyber attacks against the Democratic National Congress and other institutions. Again, using a similar technology to what we'd used previously, we could track these information releases, and you can see the first spike in the middle there, and leaks, and we could actually see they were timed to have the biggest effects on the election process. So this is very, very similar sort of MO that the Russians were showing to the German election. They used bots to extend their reach, and they used a platform called WikiLeaks to promote their leaked material. Interestingly, it was actually thanks to our analysis of this election interference that triggered SecureWorks to engage with Ripjar as well. And so we talked about consequences earlier on at the beginning, where sometimes it feels like there aren't any for online sort of criminal behavior. In this instance, though, there was. So 9 members of the Russian military intelligence unit, the GRU, were indicted by the US for election interference sometime after the election, but nevertheless, they did pick them up. And as a result, these people were placed on what's called an international watch list, which is essentially equivalent, if you like, to the FBI's most wanted list. And it turns out that these lists have to be enforced by international banks and the financial system around the world. And people on these lists are typically denied access to any kind of sort of financial services, such as a bank account. These screenshots here are screenshots of our Labyrinth monitoring application that essentially show the long arm of the law. And they also sort of demonstrate how difficult it is actually to match names to names as well in different scripts and with names in different orders or with spelling mistakes and so on. And this is a gentleman called Anatoly Kovalev, who was an officer in the GRU and was involved in the hacking scandal. Now, he won't be getting a bank account in the near future, I suspect. So where does that leave us? So we've taken all the lessons that we've learned from these kinds of problems and developed a platform that helps us to solve them in a much more general purpose manner, which brings us to Labyrinth. Now, Labyrinth is an extensible platform. It allows us to automate, monitor, and investigate problems. It allows us to solve these problems of bringing multiple disparate data sets together, run complex analytics, and automate the creation of knowledge. But that's enough from me. I'd like now to introduce you to Don Smith from SecureWorks. And Don and I have worked together now for 3 years or so, and Don is the director of the counter-threat unit at SecureWorks and is one of the most well-respected people in the industry today. And what he doesn't know about threat intelligence is probably not worth knowing. We're also looking forward to seeing you at the breakout session later to have a more in-depth discussion. Over to you, Don.
Thanks, Jeremy. And as Jeremy highlighted earlier, there was a serendipitous moment in 2016 where, in fact, a serendipitous moment in 2015 where in SecureWorks we worked out that the GRU were using bit.ly link shorteners for a tranche of their phishing emails. We collected over 20,000 of these links. And then in 2016, when people like Thomas Reid and Matt Tate were starting to talk about the Gosford2 disinformation, I was preparing a presentation that was going to talk about the influence op as opposed to the hacking. We had observed the link creation of the phishes that went into the DNC and HillaryClinton.com in near real time. I chanced upon a blog post from David Balson, who's going to be in the panel with Jeremy and I later, and I thought, that's interesting. This guy knows what he's talking about in terms of Gosford2, but what does this Ripjar company do? I saw they did technology. I saw it was in the realms of threat intelligence, and I had been tasked a month earlier with replacing the Palantir instance that SecureWorks had been running for 3 years. So I thought, I'll give these guys a buzz and see if they know what they're talking about. And they did. And if you join us in the panel session, you can hear a bit more about the adventures that we've had in the last 3 years. And I will hand back to Reid, and hopefully we're still on time.
Don, thank you. Jeremy, thank you. How exciting that is. I mean, just a cursory glance over Ripjar. We'll do a bit of a deep dive later on. But I want to tell you about the exciting breakout discussions that we're going to have a little later on in the programme. So make sure you get ready to join those on the portal in a little while. And then in parallel, as Jeremy says, I'll be running a discussion with these guys to lift the lid on threat intelligence platforms. Right, so next what we're going to do is watch some promo videos for the breakout sessions.
Hi, I'm Natalie from the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. We'd love for you to join us in our session in the break. We're going to be talking about security through diversity. We'll be talking about the latest diversity statistics in the UK cyber industry and sharing practical tips on how to boost inclusion in your workplace. We'll see you there.
Hi everyone, I'm Raki Porter. At CyNam this year, I'll be hosting one of the breakout sessions where we'll be discussing crisis management and psychology. Together we'll explore the cultures, behaviours and leadership qualities that set apart the more mature organisations. I hope you can join me and bring to the table a different perspective. I hope to see you there.
Hi, my name is Julie Tegg. I'm Director of Apprenticeships here at Gloucestershire College. It's never been a more important time for businesses to invest in their cyber and IT talent for the future. So if you're a business or a prospective apprentice, then please come and join us to find out more about the incredible apprenticeship opportunities right here in Gloucestershire. I look forward to you joining us. Bye.
Don't the breakout sessions look awesome? I wish I could be part of all of those. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce Sarah Armstrong-Smith and Matt Lundy from Microsoft. Sarah is Chief Security Advisor in Microsoft's Cybersecurity Solutions Group. She works with strategic customers in the UK and across Europe to help them evolve their security strategies. And Matt is an Assistant General Counsel in Microsoft's Digital Crimes Unit. He leads Microsoft's global strategic enforcement team, and that's comprised of former law enforcement officials, investigators, intelligence analysts, and paralegals. So Sarah's going to kick off the session, set the scene, and then Matt will take us into a case study. Welcome, Sarah and Matt. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you all today. So today we're going to be talking about how Microsoft exploited, or not how Microsoft exploited, how we disrupted the cyber criminals during a crisis. And I'm going to start by just taking you a little bit behind the scenes and giving you some insights into the kind of the hyperscale, if you like, with the global cloud and how Microsoft manages threat intelligence. So every single day, Microsoft collects, processes and analyzes over 8 trillion telemetry signals. So that's from every one of our cloud platforms. So that's Office 365, it's Azure, it's Dynamics. On top of that, we also have Xbox. We collect signals from Bing. And so all of those things combined. So how do we deal with 8 trillion signals? Well, first of all, we have to use a lot of machine learning. We have a lot of analytics. We have over nearly 4,000 people that actually work in our cybersecurity practice globally. And these made up researchers, we have engineers, data scientists, and all of those things combined is we take all of that and we turn this into what we call actual intelligence. And all of that intelligence is what we actually have as a big feedback loop into all of our systems and services. So let me just show to you how we've actually utilised that. So actually over the last year, our threat intelligence team have been looking at what are the most common threats that we're seeing right now. So actually we've analysed over 6 trillion different messages, and we've identified and blocked over 13 billion malicious emails. And so what have we seen in this time? Well, actually, there's been a massive increase or continuous increase in phishing attacks. And those are aimed at different things. So some of that's around credential phishing, and some of that's about business email compromise. And Matt's actually going to give us a little bit more information and take us behind the scenes about how actually some of those things are being utilised. And it probably wouldn't surprise you that when we talk about spoof brands, so, if you are clicking a link, for example, and you're taken to a site, this is all aimed at you, trying to harvest credentials. So, as I say, it wouldn't surprise you to learn that Microsoft are in that list. And that's because they're normally trying to get access to Office 365, Outlook, all of those different type of things. But as you can see, there are also high targets around UPS, Amazon, Apple, for example. So now let's think about which are the most devastating type of attacks. And again, it probably wouldn't surprise you in terms of when we talk about high impact threats, we're talking about ransomware. And this is where Microsoft's own incident response team that we call DART, which is our detection and response team, we actually have to step in sometimes and actually help our customers with these massive types of incidents. Now, actually, when you think about it, when people, criminals, are trying to get access to a estate, what they're looking for is the crown jewels. They're looking for those sysadmin accounts because in order to launch ransomware, they need control of your network. They need control of your domains. So sometimes it's a little bit potluck in terms of when they're harvesting credentials, when they get access to your network. How do they know that they're going to get access? So actually what we see is this little thing called lurking. When they've got access to the network, they're looking around, they're looking at what kind of data, they're doing their reconnaissance. So they're looking at the point where they want to try and actually execute their ransomware, that it's going to work and they're going to be able to gain access as quickly and as fast as possible. So very often we see at the point where they launch an attack, it's done very, very, very quickly. And sometimes that can be within 45 minutes of them launch an attack. So it's actually really critical that you are being able to have the tools and technology in the process that enables you to not just detect if someone has been able to breach your network, but also prevent that lateral movement across your network and into those admins. So now let's talk about COVID-19 and how cyber criminals have exploited that. So actually in June, our threat intelligence team did an analysis and they looked back across some of the news that's happened across the United Kingdom, the USA, and also Republic of Korea, sorry. And what they actually found is that the increase in COVID-related thaws and attacks actually went up as different news broke. So as you can kind of see in this diagram, I hope you can read it, that at the beginning of the year, sort of start of February, it kind of started out relatively low. At the point when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic, you can see the number of laws started and attacks related to COVID-19 in particular started to rise exponentially. And we saw a peak when the USA actually stated that they were going to start shutting down some of the flights to Europe. And then we've seen that gradually come down. Now, how does that actually manifest itself? So what you can see here, this is a collaboration from the National Crime Agency, and this is all of the cybercrime that's reported to all of the police across the United Kingdom. Now, I just sort of say a little bit of a caution here is how much cybercrime is actually reported to the police. But what you can see circled here is on the last slide I was showing there was a peak in those COVID-related laws that were in March. And as you can see on this slide, we then saw a peak in cybercrime being reported in April. And actually, there's a big correlation between cybercrime and financial crime. So if we then look at how the UK fraud has then panned out, as you can see over the course of the year up until COVID-19, it was a relatively straight line, if you like. It was, you had the odd peak. But as you can kind of see, I mean, from May onwards, we have seen a gradual increase in financial related crime, particularly majority of financial crime and fraud has some kind of cyber element to it. So you can kind of see that correlation as people are getting access to these credentials, and we're not just talking in a business environment, we're talking about individuals who have had their accounts hacked. They're falling foul to different scams and these type of things. So there's definitely that correlation there that we can see. So then, we have to keep asking ourselves that, phishing laws, all of these type of things are nothing new. We see them time and time and time again. But why are they so successful? And why is social engineering? Why is phishing? Why do people over and over again keep falling foul to these type of things? And really what the cyber criminals are doing is what they call this, there's a psychology behind it. And it said cyber criminals love a crisis because they're pandering to that fear, uncertainty and doubt. So some of the things that they use is something called reciprocity. So this is where they might kind of say, they might offer you a coupon, they might offer you a discount code, and that's all about you. What do I get in return if I click on this link or I go to the site? The second thing is around about scarcity. So we also see this, there's time is of the essence, that kind of thing, that you actually have to be able to respond now, respond in the next 7 days to take advantage of this special offer. We also see sometimes when we talk about business email compromise is the authority. So if you had an email, for example, from the CEO asking you to do something, are you actually going to question that? The next thing is around consistency, and this is about how often they actually ask you to do something. And sometimes what we find is they'll start small, they might ask you for something little, and they'll keep building up from there. And the next thing we sort of think is something called liking. So it is something we see a lot if you've had like your Facebook account, for example, that's been compromised. If you send a link to your friends, if they trust you, if they like you, they're more than likely to respond to that message and trust you in what you're doing. So if you sent them a little cat video doing silly things, they're like, oh, cool, I'll watch that. But that's what they're playing up to. And the kind of the final thing, if you like, is consensus. So what we see again with COVID-19, with major incidents, typically we'll see charities who are set up to help raise money and raise funds. And that's where the cyber criminals also kind of step in, because they'll pretend that they are acting on behalf of a charity or one of these different things. So I'm going to hand back to Reed now, but next we're going to hear from Matt, who is actually going to give us a real life example from our digital crimes unit.
Sarah, thank you so much for that. I mean, the scale, the complexity, the human behaviour, I mean, so much in there. I just wanted to ask you one question, really. Given the crisis from COVID-19 related phishing, what should ordinary companies be doing to treat these risks effectively, Sarah?
Yeah, I'd probably say there's two things. I mean, one of the best things that you can do to help protect yourself from phishing attacks and credential theft, that kind of thing, is actually multi-factor authentication. So that's one thing. But actually something that all companies should be doing. As we talked about, there's that sophistication around phishing laws and that kind of thing. So really what we need to be thinking about, particularly around that thought process around the psychology, is thinking around, how do we get that security culture, the security awareness out there? And it's not something you just do once a year. It's something we have to do continuously.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks for giving us that bird's eye view. Matt, over to you, really. So I think you've hinted at this before, but so a lot of what you do is cybersecurity defence. What other sort of capabilities do you have beyond defence to really help address cybercrime?
Reed, I'm sorry, I missed what you said. I had a brief outing on the audio. Sorry.
So a lot of the focus is on defense and protecting customers and the Microsoft products. What other things do you do to really go beyond the defense?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the Microsoft ECU is that we sort of play offense in the sense that we work hand in glove with our product security teams to provide the evidence and information that they need to help make our products more secure. But we also are looking at indicators of compromise, using machine learning on open source intelligence and a wide array of different threat intelligence feeds to understand who are the most prolific actors in the space, who are causing the most harm, and then look at the jurisdictions that are implicated by these organized criminal networks, and then work with appropriate law enforcement or take civil actions where needed to really drive impact. So our job is sort of to be the offensive side of cybersecurity in an attempt to drive that deterrence, to, both specific and general, and to refer these bad guys to law enforcement so that they're no longer hurting people.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. And just to wrap up, if I can turn to you, Sarah, we face an arms race with phishing campaigns growing in sophistication and reach. What would you say, on a positive note, is the future of cybercrime and how we can really deal with it as a society?
Yeah, thank you, Reed. That's a great question. And I think what we've been reflecting on is how cyber criminals continuously change their techniques and tactics. So they will try every which way possible to try and get access to your network or to get access to your data. So really what we talk about is to adopt the principles of zero trust. And really that's around never trust, always verify, and assume compromise. So that's really a step change difference, because we know it's impossible to stop every single attack. So, just because someone has the right credentials, if they have the right device, if it looks like they're logging on from the right location, we can't trust that as being the right person or the right device until we verified it. So this is really about, just making sure, if you assume somebody could get access to your network, how do we reduce the mean time to detect and that mean time to remediate? But also, as we were sort of talking about, we have to disrupt that return on investment. So it's our job, if you like, to try and make it as hard and as difficult for the attacker to get access to your network and across your network. So I think it's really important, as I said, zero trust, but also I would just say is, really think about how you can also protect the admins and everything you can do to stop them gaining access to that, because that is going to disrupt them as much as possible.
That's so interesting, Sarah. And I was really fascinated by the economic aspect of this, something that maybe people haven't necessarily thought about in general. So thank you to Sarah and Matt. That was awesome. What we've heard is happening at the front line of cybersecurity with Ripjar, with Microsoft, is amazing. But how do you get started in the industry? I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Madeline to lead our student showcase so that we can all find out. Madeline, over to you.
Thanks, Reed. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm delighted to be leading our first student showcase at a CyNam event. This is really important and something that we at CyNam are super passionate about. We've been talking about staying ahead of cybercrime, but like Reed said, having the best talent at our disposal and the brightest minds is really important. And I'm joined by two of them. I'm joined by Lauren Bennett, a GCSE student and cyber ambassador at Whiting School, and also Ben Heathfield, a cyber apprentice at Bamboo Technology and Gloucestershire College. So Lauren, I'm going to come to you first. Lockdown was obviously really difficult for students of your age. There was lots of uncertainty about exams and about your education, but you really saw that as a challenge to learn something new and further your skill set in computer science. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel for everyone, lockdown was quite challenging. We all had our ups and down days. For me, I was set with a challenge to complete all the schoolwork that we were set, and I feel like it was very uncertain of what was going to happen with our GCSEs and obviously mocks and everything. So my days weren't very fulfilled. So to fulfill my day, I decided to teach myself how to code and build an app. So I started with a bit of Xcode, and I set my standards quite high, and I had quite high expectations of myself, which then did lead me to become quite frustrated when it wasn't quite happening how I wanted it to. But the whole process of learning how to code, and even now I can't fully code yet, but the perseverance that I had to apply to be able to get where I am now has definitely taught me something for the future.
Now, you are doing that coding to code for your app, and I know you've been working with some really exciting local cybersecurity and computer science companies. So where are you at with your app, and what support of those companies helped you, and how have they inspired you by getting involved and supporting you?
So my app, not to give too much away, but hopefully it will save the world, and I feel that having the industry behind it is so important, because for me, at the start, I wasn't sure how it could progress, and it was kind of just like an idea for me, but having the industry behind it gives me hope for the app and will hopefully allow me to build it into a business and have a future in it. At the moment, I've been working with CACI, Clearcut Cyber and BAE Systems, and we're kind of just defining the business plan to ensure that there is a future for the app and to keep myself motivated during the building process.
And obviously you came back to school and you recognised actually that you really loved computer science. You know, you'd found that passion because you taught yourself that skill set. So you've come back and you've now decided to become a cyber student ambassador, which is absolutely amazing. And why do you want to take on this role? Because it's really important to you, not only to help inspire younger students, but also captivate those older students who haven't yet thought about computer science.
Yeah, so for me, I started my computer science journey in year 10, so at the start of my GCSEs. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of us. And for some, it's quite daunting to start so late, because with maths and English, we've had that build from reception, like gradually building up our steps. But computer science, I was exposed to it and I was thrown straight into the deep end. So I feel like it's so important that we actually start getting children involved and to allow children to feel able to be involved and get them brave enough to involve themselves in extracurricular activities and teach them from a younger age, because this is our future and this is how we shape society now.
Amazing. Now, Ben, if I can come to you, when we think about supporting students, there, you know, a lot of us will think actually that's about supporting students who are maybe at university, but also at school age. But you won't mind me saying you're 30 years old and you are now taking on an apprenticeship as a mature student, which I think is really important that people recognise that at any age you can become a student and you can learn new skills. So why did you decide to go down this path, and kind of what have you learned so far?
So cybersecurity is a fantastic, fast-paced, growing industry at the moment, and there's many great opportunities within Gloucestershire, where I'm living, with my current employer, Bamboo Technology Group, as well, who are in partnership with Gloucestershire College to really work together and get their opportunity. It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's loads going on in Cheltenham, so you're definitely in the right place. And, you know, there's a big shift. We've seen the government talking about doing apprentices. Why do you think it's important that companies see apprenticeships not only for those new recruits, but actually as an option to help staff get further their knowledge, you know, and specialise into what they want to do?
Well, yes, it's a common misconception that apprenticeships are just for school leavers or new recruits. They're actually for anyone over the age of 16. So it's a great way for companies to actually use their existing workforce and tap into the talent right in front of them. It also boosts the morale of the workforce, and also the company looks great because they're really investing in what's in front of them.
Yeah, and I think that morale is really important. You can both tell that you're really passionate about what you're doing. So, you know, why do you love it? Really quickly, Lauren, what do you love about computer science and cybersecurity?
For me, computer science is just fun, and this that we are involved in today and all the other events that I've got involved with is the reason why I love computer science, because with any other subject, you can walk into the classroom and it's just the curriculum, it's just the teachers, and there's no exposure to the industry, and coming here to into the industry and them treating me like adults and making me feel like I have a future in this industry is just so important to me, and it just makes my learning so much more fun.
Oh, fabulous. And Ben, what about you? What do you love the most about the industry?
It's just a fantastic place to be right now with learning and also earning at the same time within apprenticeship. It's just a fantastic opportunity where you can, well, your employer is paying for your apprenticeship degree, and you can really make the start of your future really within the cyber industry.
Fabulous. So I really would encourage anyone, if you haven't already got involved with young people, thought about apprenticeships, they are a fantastic way to support that talent pipeline. We're going to head to our breakout sessions now. We're really excited about these. So we've got the Ripjar session. You can stay here where Reed will be leading that with the Ripjar team. Or if you click back to the main portal on your broadcast site and head to the breakout sessions, you can join the fabulous ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society, Natalie and Jenny, or Soprasteria, Raki Porter is going to be doing a fantastic session on the psychology of crisis management, or Gloucestershire College, who are going to lead a session on apprenticeships. So do enjoy, engage with the community, and we'll see you back here in 30 minutes.
Welcome to our breakout session with Ripjar. So we've got Jeremy and Don are back, and they're now joined by David Bolson, Director of Intelligence at Ripjar. Welcome, folks. So for you at home, this is an interactive session, so please get your questions ready on the portal, and I've got my other iPads ready. So to get us going, Don, if I could start with you, can you give us an overview of what we mean by a threat intelligence platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I can at least give you an overview of what I regard our threat intelligence management system as. Others may have different definitions, but I've got some slides here that I can just take people through and show them a little bit of the problem that we were trying to address. As Jeremy highlighted at the start, you know, a lot of this is about marshalling data that you have and making sure that you can make sense of it. It's also about being efficient and that ensuring you don't have highly paid researchers doing relatively dull but important operational tasks. As I mentioned in the intro, I was tasked with replacing an implementation of Palantir that we'd had running for about 4 years. Like a lot of people, when you start off doing something like this, your immediate kind of hammer to go and hit a nail with is elk. And as I highlighted earlier, it was during that period that I came across the Ripjar guys and immediately knew that talking to David, Jeremy, Tom, and others, they knew exactly what they were talking about. So as I say, we're bringing together data. We access that data through workflows. And again, this is another intriguing and interesting aspect of the tooling that Ripjar have built. I think I kind of defined our project initially very much like scoping up a Palantir replacement with the Palantir software, unfortunately, in the back of my mind. And I remember flying back from Ottawa over the weekend of WannaCry, having visited a partner there and seen some tooling they had and thought, we really need to be able to automate the researcher playbook here. And then on the Monday, Jeremy came up to Edinburgh and said, I've had an idea about workflows. So with workflows, what we can do is we can take a basic investigation and we can pivot. We can search all the things. We can search our intelligence. We can use enrichments. We can search client telemetry. There's about 10 petabytes of data that is searchable from the system that we've built jointly with the Ripjar guys. That may not seem like a lot of data to people who live and work around Cheltenham, but it's certainly a lot of data for the private sector to work with. We can get results, and then researchers can make sense of stuff. We can also very quickly ingest open source intelligence and pull that in using some of the NLP tooling that's built into the platform. A small thing, but a really important thing, particularly when you're dealing with data that might be client data, is that the entity level security just works. It's been built with the experience of decades of how to get this right. And the security markings, as you may see later, are very important. It just works well. Finally, when a researcher has made an assessment that something is genuinely bad, that we have made sense of it, we can move it in the platform into what we call knowledge, which is our kind of settled understanding of the world of badness. And then that's available for dissemination to downstream consumers, whether that's our SOC analysts, whether that's our incident responders, whether that is a machine doing the querying. All of this stuff can be disseminated downstream. And if you imagine that an investigation is a single subgraph anchored by things like threat groups, malware families, other what I call structural nodes, as we publish these subgraphs into our main knowledge graph, they unify and it becomes a single unified graph of badness. One example of that, so just free tip, if you're ever struggling with a Rosetta Stone, go to the SecureWorks website. We have one that is continually updated there from the REST API that exposes knowledge. So, a fun thing, you can read our threat group profiles there. Another example is just moving data around. You could say anyone can write an ETL for moving botnet emulation data. We have little Python scripts that pretend to be the bots that are checking in all the time, so we can see in real time things like the Cyber Command efforts to take down TrickBot a few weeks ago. Now, the ETLs are easy to write, but if we have them as part of our threat intelligence management system, any incident responder dropping information into an investigation, you can immediately see that we know something about this, malware family involved, and then they can immediately work out what other TTPs are important in helping them respond to the incident. We also have a system called ITS, Infrastructure Tracking System. We can give this little recipes that say, hey, this is how this actor does stuff, or here is a canned search against Census or VT or whatever, and that stuff is automatically fed into teams to alert the analysts and then is held in a data set in the threat intelligence management system. So a lot of programmatic queries of the system that we've built together with Jeremy and crew, and indeed a lot of human queries. We've made some decent progress. We've got nearly 500 researchers and incident responders that are accessing the system. It's created a place where we can put our trusted assessment of what we know of the world of badness. And 3.5 years in, feeling very proud of what we've built together. Back to you, Reid.
So we've heard a lot about tech, a lot of tech there, and a lot of data. But could you maybe tell the audience, how do these platforms support real-world intelligence operations? How does it actually, help with your missions?
Yeah, so that's, again, I have an example that I can walk through here. Now, it may be not the most compelling example because these things are generally airing other people's dirty laundry when you are a service provider or an incident responder. But in this case, I had a journalist call me up and ask me a question about a domain. The domain itself was forexdualsystem.com, and you can see in the top right, this matches something we've got in knowledge. So I can then map that to knowledge and do a quick query around that to see what else do we know. I'm just doing a very dumb one-hop traversal search in knowledge, and I can see straight away that this domain is linked to a threat group that we call Bronze President, and a couple of other infrastructure indicators. You can also see that the labeling is automatically changed as different data has arrived in the investigation that's got different security marking on it. I can then do some further pivoting. I want to know a little bit more, so I'm going to search for only published threat intelligence product related to that threat group. So I do that, and I get a bunch of end product reporting sitting there. I can then actually, highlight one of them. The threat analysis is one of our long-form products, and I can look at that and gain an understanding of the actor. Or I could do a dumb thing and simply do a one-hop traversal search on the actor and pull back all sorts of hashes, other indicators, malware families, countries, and other TTPs. We also have the ability to search the telemetry, as I've highlighted. We have this federated search application. And once that stuff is dropped down onto the graph, and what you can see is once more the security labeling has changed. I've actually taken the labels off this graph now, which is very easy to do because we have some client telemetry at the bottom. I can tell it'll be difficult for you to guess that is endpoint client telemetry, and in fact, that endpoint client telemetry relates to this report that we published around Christmas last year of a well-known human rights organization being persistently targeted by this Chinese threat group with a compromise of their offices in Hong Kong. So, not particularly e-crimey, this is more a hostile state actor, but hopefully read that goes some way to showing the sort of flexibility we've got and how quickly we can move from a guess to knowledge about a situation and triage what we're dealing with.
I will come to the others in a minute for questions, but I've just got a question in from the audience, and it's a specific one. What traces, other than IP addresses, do threat actors leave after an attack? And you may or may not be able to answer that, but other than IP addresses, what sort of traces would you be looking for?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and all manner of traces. Obviously, indicators are at the very low end of the spectrum of interest for us in terms of tracking, because bad guys can move infrastructure very easily. They can masquerade, and of course, increasingly, Chinese and other hostile state actors are using commodity tooling to avoid attribution embarrassments. But in this particular case of Bronze President, this was an organization, the victim here was an organization that we had evicted the Chinese from some time previously, and they had indeed been in that network for quite a long time before then. And some of my staff who had moved to secure works from, say, the NCSE or other government bodies that were involved in looking at these things in the past were noting that they could see the actors using the same directories, that they had the same kind of styles of writing scripts, that they were renaming the malware to 2 letters dot something, just lots of little human nuances which are actually some of the better ways of tracking bad guys rather than something which can change very, very quickly. So absolutely, everything from, hey, I want to live in the recycle bin, that's my happy home, to I'm going to come back and do a credential run every Thursday morning, or I'm going to come back and do a credential run every 3 months. But you can build up a feel and, I guess, a kind of a smell or a taste for some of these actors from the bits of human behaviours that's very hard for them to stamp out.
For that, Don. So that's, going up the levels of abstraction and following the arms race. If I could just move to Jeremy and maybe talk a bit more about the sort of platform piece. What's your sort of biggest challenge in building and creating this sort of threat intel platform, Jeremy?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think there's lots of answers to it as well. Probably the first one was that we were accidentally building 2 products at the same time when we were working with Don. This was not a planned activity and really pushed the company, to its max. Maybe the next part of the answer is Don and his team's rapidly expanding list of requirements. Clearly was a challenge to manage too. But as a result of those requirements, and that's the sort of industry insight that Don and his team brought to the product, we've got a fantastically capable platform out of it. And so I suppose perhaps a more detailed answer is that, ultimately we don't know what the criminals are going to do next, how they're going to behave, how they're going to work. And in order to support teams like Don's, the software and the platform has to ultimately be very, very, very flexible and be able to change and pivot, on a dime as the threat changes on a daily basis. I suppose in particular, sort of the high-end criminals are constantly innovating, and in particular nation states and so on. So building flexibility in the platform is key. And if you consider the different areas where that flexibility is required, we're talking sort of at a simple level from data formats and schemas and being able to accommodate a changing perspective of the threat from a data point of view. Then there's coping with volumes as well. So how much data is flowing through the system, how many external sources need to be queried and brought into play in order to provide context and answers around the problems. Then analytics as well. Analytics are always challenging to write and make them relevant to a particular problem. So providing a place and a platform to allow those to be written easily and quickly and apply them to the data is key. And then managing users and security and protection. The data that Don manages in his platform is, it's very sensitive. He has a lot of key customers that wouldn't want the data to be exposed. And some of the background and experience that the Ripjar team have got in building secure systems and data protection, was absolutely critical, as Don pointed out in his first part of his presentation, of how we can protect individual attributes of that data to make it secure. So flexibility, I suppose, building in flexibility is probably the key answer to the question.
No, that's great, Jeremy. And data security and privacy is going to be something that CyNam is really interested in going forward. Absolutely. Now, David, if I can just move to you. I'm conscious that we haven't really given you any time, but knowing what is going on is only half the battle. Should we also seek to use the information that you have to disrupt the criminals?
Yeah, so I think generally the value of intelligence is being able to use it. Just sort of accumulating information and knowledge and not doing anything about it, feels to me kind of perverse. On the other hand, by publicizing all kinds of threat intelligence and pushing it out there often changes the behavior of the criminals themselves. So you're always in this balance between the things that you know that you should act on and the things that you should keep a watching brief on. And generally this is called the intelligence loss game. And I think a lot of companies we see, pushing out threat intelligence purely for marketing points of view. I think that's probably not a great trend. But I do think, the active defence of the UK that's been going on for the last few years, led by the government, is fantastic, and using TTPs that we know from threat intel shops all around the world, really, and blocking particularly the low level criminality raises the bar for blocking, regular people's free use of the internet, and I think that's a really important thing. But I think reckless disclosure of threat intelligence can lead to lots of hard work being undone. So I think it's a really interesting question, and lots of interesting debate to have over that one.
For that, David. If I could just stay with the sort of cyber criminals themselves, I've got a question here from David of Equity Ventures Limited in Cheltenham. Do you think the balance of advantage is still with the bad guys? I'll just leave it there. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think there is a worrying trend where we are seeing every year the number of cyber attacks go up, and partly that's due to we have more awareness of cyber attacks, but it's also because the tools to conduct them are becoming more easier to use and more freely available. I think there is an advantage at the moment with cyber attacks, but it can all be relatively easily prevented. A lot of the vulnerabilities that are being exploited, some of the top vulnerabilities go back, many, many years, maybe even in decades in some cases. So I think there is more to be done on the most sort of fundamental, what's called cyber hygiene, to stop that from happening. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think also the maturity around global governance is rapidly increasing. As Jeremy mentioned in his opening address, we're now seeing international sanctions against cyber criminals and nation states to try and deter ultimately people engaging in this sort of crime. So I think there's a lot of progress that's been made over the last few years, but more needs to be done.
Cool, thank you, David. Got another question from the audience, and this is for you, Jeremy, I think. Ripjar and SecureWorks are two organisations that understand the cyber threat landscape. But what differences have you seen in the ways that you as a small startup versus a large company tackle cyber threats that your own company face? And maybe we'll come to Dawn afterwards as well. So for you first, Jeremy, what do you think?
Cyber threats that Ripjar faces, was that, Reid?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of maybe about the differences that you've seen as a small startup versus a large company. You know, how do you tackle the cyber threats yourself?
That's a fascinating question, and actually quite topical for us at the moment. And we've built a lot of software over the years, and when we release it to our customers, and this is from a vendor's perspective, I think, we have to put it through penetration testing and vulnerability scanning and so on. And I think as a small company going through the expense each time of putting their product through those sorts of pretty diligent tests, it's expensive. And I think as well, it's also very inconsistent. You know, we've had a number of different penetration testers try to attack our software, and we've got different results each time. And that isn't it's not a very hopeful place for us to be as a vendor if we can't get a consistent set of results when we're actually trying to, improve our software. I don't know. I know Don's company, SkillWorks, provides this as a service, and he's offered to do this to us as well. Maybe we should take him up on the offer.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Don, what would you say?
Oh, well, it's very hard. I think if I can couple my answer to David's answer to the previous question, we've got 4,500 customers. We do about 600 reactive incident response engagements every year. And what we don't see is in our recommendations at the end of incident response saying, hey, you needed this esoteric, shiny, blinky thing with a blue LED rather than a green LED. What we see repeatedly is failure to use basic hygiene, patching, multi-factor auth, ridiculous things exposed to the internet, and so on and so forth. So getting the basics right is super important. And obviously in SecureWorks, our job is to learn from everything we see and everything we do. And our internal security team has all of that information and uses them to defend us. But getting the basics right, building your stack up is just super important.
Thanks for that, Don. I've got another question coming in from the audience. It says, thank you for an insightful talk. How do you recognise the non-bot accounts to follow to identify radicalisation without knowing them prior to analysis on places like Twitter? So recognising non-bot accounts.
I'll happily take that one.
David, thank you.
And I think there's an interesting trend towards automation, and you'll see lots of stories in the media about online influence and how bots are trying to sort of subvert elections. I think they play a role, but human beings are ultimately responsible for a lot of these things. And the differences between these two types of activities can be quite broad, right? Some bots are very, very blunt instruments, just churning out message after message after message, and others are much more insidious and have much more sort of complicated, almost human-like behaviors. Now, I think potentially one of the trends that is truly worrying is how AI is able to create almost perfect human-like responses, and I suspect that more research needs to be done in this area of how people are influenced online and how that affects ultimately behavior. Can people truly be influenced by automated bots? I suppose that's a long-winded way of answering, saying that it's a complicated one. But clearly there are tangible differences between people and the way they behave and the way they interact, particularly back and forth, right? People are not a broadcast medium. People are a conversational medium, and they typically are influenced by the interactions they have with people rather than just receiving, a message from the blue. So I think that's one of the safety guards we've got. But I think it is going to become more difficult as this sort of deep fake and AI-based influence technology becomes more mature.
Thank you, David. We've got another question coming in. I think we've got time for a few more. What's the top 3 things a small company can do to spot cyber attacks on their organisation? And that's from Shane from A2G Cyber. Jeremy, Don, which one? Jeremy.
I think that's a Don question, I think.
Yeah. Don, so what top 3 things can a small company do to spot cyber attacks?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the obvious point I would make, and you would say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you, Don, is that if it's a small company, you aren't going to have the dedicated manpower and security professionals to do a decent job of it yourself. So you want to basically try and find somebody to work with. It could be us, it could be anybody that's like us, that will help deal with the basic lifting and shifting of looking at what's happening on your endpoints and your perimeter. And that means that you can focus your efforts on thinking about what your valuable data is, how you're protecting your critical business data, how you're training your staff, making sure people don't just respond to the basic social engineering attacks, and so on and so forth. And I know Shane, and I know he knows the answer to that question already, so thank you for that one.
Small community, isn't it? Okay, let's move on. We've got a few more minutes. So I've got one here. If a current threat is exploiting a known vulnerability in a system, and that's used by both the general public and the industry, but the actors are only targeting governments and large corporations, would disclosure be made for the general public, or would it be contained to aid in the apprehension of the criminal and to mitigate the damages afterwards? If that makes sense. And that's from Evo.
I'll just throw some facts in there. There's been a large number, 4 or 5 relatively well-known vulnerabilities in kind of remote access technologies, firewalls, Citrix and other things in the last 12 months, SharePoint about 12 months ago. And in each and every one of these cases, what we've seen is hostile state actors jumping on them immediately and capitalizing on them. And then within 2 or 3 weeks, they're getting picked up as the Metasploit modules appear and so on and so forth. So I think, this goes back to David's comment on the risk reward of Intel disclosure. I think, where we sit with that in SecureWorks is that it is important to let people know when this thing goes out very broadly. And of course, it's very important to let people know within private, closed trust circles when things are happening in a targeted hostile state actor way. So the whole thing, there's no 0-1. It's all a sliding scale and a balance.
So I guess there's an interplay between sort of state actors and cyber criminals, and the malware sort of flows between. Fascinating. If I could just move on again, we've got a few more minutes left. I think this one's probably for you, Jeremy. As the nature of the system, you mentioned that you used machine learning for threat detection analysis. I would like to know how you make sure that the data set is updated and the data that you collect. Thank you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah, and it is a challenge. It is a challenge. So we use machine learning extensively throughout our software platform for all sorts of different things, actually. They could be very small analytics that we're writing to perhaps understand the context or the language of something, or they could be quite sophisticated, where they're streaming analytics that are operating in real time, where they've been trained, on a huge amount of data. But getting hold of good quality, truthed training data is always very difficult. And I think the sort of problem you're pointing out there is that the nature of the analytic needs to change over time and adapt to the data as it changes. And we've had some particularly poignant instances where we haven't done a very good job on this, it has to be said. And we've discovered some way down the line that perhaps the classification of data that we're applying through those analytics is actually incorrect. And there's a pretty mandrolic way that we can go about that. We can discover it manually. We can then, try and retrain whatever that analytic is inside of that system. Or this is an approach that we've started to look at. We can actually build other analytics to look at the analytics that we have already built in order to be able to truth them and test them out sort of in an automated fashion. So that's where we are with it at the moment. And, it is genuinely a problem. And I completely get the question.
I'm going to stay with you again, Jeremy. We're getting our money's worth tonight. So is Ripjar using hybrid cloud solutions and security for their own company? So the self-preservation of Ripjar applications, the crown jewels, and the data collected needs to be as secure, if not more secure, as its clients' data.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't give the game away then, should I, actually? We do a bit of everything at Ripjar. We're fairly multi-talented in all sorts of different deployment scenarios. We use public clouds, we use private clouds, we use customers' clouds, you name it. We'll go wherever it's appropriate.
Thank you. And I've got one more question, I think, maybe one or two. David, if I can come to you again. So another question from the audience. We're getting some great questions, by the way. Really, really, really fantastic. Is the security of information collected in social media portals currently one of the key determinants of the development of new online media? If that makes sense. So I think it's, social media, yeah. David.
Of online media. I mean, relating it back to the threat actors, there are specific dark web, versions of all of your favorite social media channels where all of this is developed and sold in a very complex ecosystem of criminals from all over the world. And I think one of the things that I've always been partially impressed by, I think, is the resilience of those networks of a sort of criminal marketplace, so to speak, where you have specialisms, people, specializing in malware, people specializing in, bulletproof hosting, and people specializing in spear phishing, as Sarah was talking about earlier. So, I think that kind of criminal ecosystem is incredibly driven by social media, and I think in terms of monitoring that, absolutely, companies working with different partners are monitoring those hackers, monitoring and understanding what they're up to, and trying to produce credible threat intelligence that helps businesses protect their networks.
Okay, and one final question, and this is for you, Don. It's quite a technical one. Is it time for email to be detached from the AD credentials and environment of the corporate network to separate creds and environment in a sandbox?
That is a technical question and an interesting one. I think, there are perhaps an alternative approaches. We have a customer that is an extremely well-known brand. I won't say their name, but they is a consumer brand, but they themselves do not use any of their consumer brands as their corporate mail identity. And what is astonishing is how low the number of phishes are that this particular customer gets. So there's some sense in creating domains that are not related to your brand. I think these days with the Jericho Foundation started all this about 10, 12, 15 years ago. But these days with the borderless approach, software-defined perimeter, whatever it is people call, I think we are in a situation where identity is currently the perimeter, which does mean there has to be a focus on ensuring that you protect that identity, the situational awareness for adaptive authentication and such like. So it's an interesting concept. I can't think immediately how I would go about implementing that, but and I also realise that Office 365 and other such solutions mean that singular identity gives access to an awful lot of things these days. So it definitely needs careful consideration.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, David. We've worked you really hard, and you can have a bit of a rest now. So thanks very much. And we're going to move on to our next segment. Welcome back to all of you from the breakout sessions. I hope you found them engaging and helpful. We would love to hear your feedback directly and on social media. So please tweet or comment on LinkedIn with your thoughts. I don't think we've got an Instagram account yet, but I think we need to get one. But we do. We do have a Slack group, so please sign up for that because we really want to keep the community going after this event. So talking about community, I'd like to hand over now to Chris and Mads for a community update.
Thank you, Reid. That's brilliant. It was great listening to all those questions in the breakout session as well. We've got 750 people actually live online right now, so thank you so much for being a part of this. We're going to hear from all the cyber clusters. CyNam is a UK cyber cluster, but there's a lot of other clusters across the UK doing some fantastic work. So we wanted to reach out to them and find out more about what they're up to. So the Southwest Cyber Cluster, there's significant increase in their monthly cluster meetings, and they're really driving engagement across cybersecurity with industry across Devon, Somerset, Cornwall, Dorset. They're working with the University of Plymouth and the colleges in the region, as well as with innovation in higher skills and supporting the Secure Southwest event in March 2021. So make sure you check that out. We'll get all the details and pop it out to you. Madeline, what about you?
Well, I've got an update from the Cyber Wales Women, a fabulous group. So for Ada Lovelace Day, they had a collaborative meeting with the Scotland cluster, the Women's Scotland cluster, which is really lovely to see them all engaging across clusters. Holly Libry and Claire Johnson, two awesome women, have become Cyber First ambassadors supporting the Cyber First Schools initiative. They've had 2 schools in Wales become gold standard Cyber First schools, so congratulations to them. And the University of South Wales also won Cyber University of the Year in the Cyber Awards. Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madeline. So we're moving north now. We're going north of the border to Scotland, where the cluster is led by Kira Mitchell. Hello, Kira, if you're out there today. They're doing an awful lot of development. Skills Development Scotland are leading on a programme funded by Scottish Government and aimed at neurodivergent people, which aims to raise awareness of cybersecurity careers, identify skills and talent, and develop learning pathways to ensure long-term sustainment within Scottish institutions, which is fantastic to hear. West Lothian College, Napier University and Perth Autism Support, in partnership with Perth College, and Inverness College have all been awarded funds from the programme and are keen to have industry involved as well to support areas such as mentorship, industry insight seminars and work experience opportunities. So anybody that wants to get involved in what is undoubtedly a fantastic and worthy cause, then please do reach out to the Scottish cluster. They've got a few events coming up as well, which is great to hear. The Scottish Cyber Cluster is running a Cyber Innovation Clinic on the 28th of October, bringing together experienced cyber experts, entrepreneurs with a number of cyber startups who have applied to a pitch of the event and seeking advice and insights from the panel of experts. And Cyber Scotland Week is the 22nd to the 28th of February 2021. They will have a virtual presence as well, so everybody today can get involved in that as well, and it is really fantastic to see that we can do so. So back to you, Madeline. Anything else?
Yep, coming south, but not that south, because we're in the Cyber North cluster. So congratulations to the Cyber North cluster, who in September had their biggest cybersecurity event, the biggest cybersecurity event in the Northeast, actually. This Cyberfest covered a whole host of topics, including cybercrime. So like we've done today, I'm sure they discussed lots of really good topics. They looked at careers. They had Sunderland College, Newcastle University all involved. And they also combined some cybersecurity art from the Sunderland University and Creative Fuse. So well done to you guys. I think you've got another update?
Yes, I have. Over the CNAD in Northern Ireland. So finally, the Northern Ireland cluster will be holding a webinar for fintech startups in association with Fintech Corridor. The webinar will be taking place on November the 25th. Full details are yet to be released, but you can keep up with developments on the Northern Ireland Cyber Cluster website, nicyber.tech/events. Again, we'll send out the details of that after this. Madeline?
Well, just a quick update from what we're doing here in Cheltenham. So at the last event, you saw a presentation about the Golden Valley. The Golden Valley procurement process is going well. It's on track, and they are hoping to have a partner before Cyber UK next year. All of the partners that they currently have involved are really sharing that vision for that development to showcase what the industry has to offer in Cheltenham. Hub A and Cheltenham Borough Council have won a £3.1 million grant, which is fantastic, to help with the development of the Minister Innovation Exchange. And this is going to help excel the cyber community within Cheltenham with a new purpose-built cyber innovation centre in the town centre, opening next year. So that's something next year to look forward to. If you're interested in that, please contact the tallest man I know, Bruce Gregory, and he will be able to provide you with some more details. Finally, congratulations to all the schools in Gloucestershire that were awarded Cyber First status. We've had loads of them. That's really fantastic. We're going to be running a roundtable discussion with Gloucestershire College, looking at how SMEs can get more involved in apprentices with Gloucester College over the next few months. So keep a lookout for that. And we can confirm the theme for 21.1 next year will be on data and security. So if you're interested in getting involved, please get in touch. We're always looking for people to get involved, new, exciting, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Back to you, Chris.
Brilliant, thank you. So loads going on across the UK with all the cyber clusters, doing some fantastic work out there. You can find out more about each of the individual clusters and their contact details on our content page at cynam.org. as well. Reed, back to you now for another interesting session.
It sounds like we have quite a cluster of clusters emerging, and that's just fantastic to hear. So it's now my absolute pleasure to introduce you to James Muir from BAE Systems Threat Intelligence Team. James has been part of the Threat Intel team at BAE since 2013. In his role as research lead, he looks at a variety of aspects of the cyber threat landscape. So welcome, James.
Hello.
As you know, I'm finishing off my master's and I'm doing an assignment on ransomware at the moment related to COVID-19. So I'm really interested in what you've got to say about ransomware. So over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Reed, and all the best with your studies. So yeah, I'm here today to talk to you about ransomware. So I think yeah, there we go. The clicker's working. That's always good. Ransomware's perfect storm then. And what better way to start than with a definition? So if you go onto google.com, you get this quite nice definition of ransomware, a type of malicious software designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid, which is a perfectly fine definition. But this quote at the bottom is quite interesting. I don't know who said it or when, but if you said this in around 2017, you'd have been bang on the money. So although ransomware is usually aimed at individuals, it certainly was until recently, it's only a matter of time before business is targeted as well. And business is certainly being targeted as we speak. So all these headlines of doom come from ransomware attacks over the last year or two. And as they scroll through, I just thought it'd be good to reflect before we move on a number of themes that kind of come out of them. So the first thing that strikes me is that nothing is off limits for the cyber criminals behind these attacks. All sectors are being impacted by them. And underneath that, you've got a range of impacts that are being seen. So at company level, with individuals, with supply chains, and kind of implications for society in general. The third thing is that some of the figures that are being demanded and paid in these attacks are eye-watering. So we'll just move on now to look at a typical attack and how a typical attack looks in the current day. And really it's I guess you could call it a bish bash bosh, or a three-tier system, if you will, for these attacks. First of all, the attackers need to get in, so network intrusion. Once they're within the victim network, they're going to try and elevate their access, propagate around, as Sarah was describing earlier, get to the good stuff and exfiltrate data. And this is a kind of key TTP that we've been seeing since the turn of the year. So that data that's stolen will be key later on. When the time is right, the operators are going to look to encrypt everything with their ransomware, and then move on to stage 3, which is to demand the ransom and make those further threats. So this stolen data that was taken out of the network in stage 2 is really useful here and can be used as extra leverage if no payment is forthcoming from the victim. So it's really it's kind of double extortion thing going on here. You've got availability has been compromised and confidentiality has been threatened as well. So the maze operators whose victim blog kind of for naming and shaming and adding leverage is shown at the bottom here. And that's an example of a blog where the victims will be named and threats will be made to the organisation about the data that's been stolen. So just going to annotate this now with a kind of perfect storm of reasons for success behind this model. So firstly, network intrusion. Attackers have found lots of good ways in. As Don explained earlier, the number of vulnerabilities in VPN type products has been alarming. These have been quickly POC'd and quickly used by cyber criminals for these attacks, among other things. So secondly, groups are becoming much more skilled at this middle stage. The ransomware speed run now, as Sarah said, is less than an hour end-to-end, which is pretty phenomenal, where this type of thing would have taken sort of 2 or 3 weeks sometimes a few years back. Pen test tools such as Cobalt Strike are coming in handy and being used very, very effectively by a number of these groups. Third point to make is that this whole model of double extortion and threatening with stolen data is really working. It's definitely being copied. We're now tracking over 15 groups using this TTP, and it is working for them in terms of getting to a payment. Two things that kind of go outside of the model then. So any payment that's made is going to fuel the cycle, attract more criminal interest to this model, and that's something that we've seen. And as Jeremy mentioned just earlier, criminal collaboration service model is quite well, it's working well for them. It's growing, lots of groups are offering distinct services, and they're able to collaborate and find efficiencies. So moving on then, and one of the things we've been doing on the team is trying to get a sense of the scale of the problem by tracking these victim blogs that I talked about. So while the web design might leave a little bit to be desired, we're now looking at 15 of these, scraping them, analysing them for changes, and then looking at the victims that are named on them to try and get an idea of some of the targeting preferences and the scale of the problem, as I said. So I'll just present some statistics now that we've observed. So from the blogs that we've analysed, and this data goes back to earlier this year, so in 2020 we've seen over 800 victims named across 15 of these blogs. And I'm very confident that that number will be over 1,000 by the end of the year. Median victim revenue is $40 million a year, so a decent-sized organisation on average. There's a very long tail to that, so over 40 of the victims and assets are over $1 billion a year revenue, so major organisations and many household names. We estimate the ransom payment rate is about 10%, and that's definitely a minimum. So I think other providers have shown sort of rates of about a third for different groups, and I would certainly not dispute that. Let's move on then. A few more things to show. So 60% of the victims are US based, but lots of those are multinationals, as I mentioned. And if we just look at the line graph here showing this is the rate of additions of new victims to these blogs. We're at about 7 or 8 on average a day now across the 15 different ransomware operators, which is pretty bad. And in case you thought they were going away, some of them have actually started sort of semi-publicly recruiting for further hackers. This is the Revil group, just shown on that screenshot there, courtesy of Bleeping Computer. Right, so that's the scale of the problem. I thought I'd change perspective slightly now and ask the audience a question, essentially. So what would you do? Just going to quickly pause for a drink. So you are Captain Picard, who has successfully retrained and become the CEO of a large manufacturing company, revenue $1 billion a year. So he's come in on a Monday morning and fallen victim to a ransomware attack. The enterprise IT is down, no pun intended. Manufacturing has had to be stopped based on safety concerns, and the backups are also affected, so there's no way to restore technically. The criminal group responsible has stolen designs, so all the IP, order books, personal data of staff, and all company emails. Basically everything's gone. They've named your company on their victim blog and published a sample to show that they're for real, and they are demanding 10 million in ransom, which is going to increase to 20 million in a week if you don't pay. So that will get you restoration of your files and the promise that the stolen data won't be leaked or sold on. So I've got a question now, and I thought it'd be fun to, I believe you can, as the audience, put answers into the chat. So we've got 3 options. It's going to be A, B or C, and we'll go through those now. So please spam away into the chat, and Reed's going to get his abacus out and tally those up for us at the end to a first order of approximation. So what would you do? Would you A, pay and pray that it all goes away? Do you B, say no way Jose or Sergey? Or C, take early retirement in Saint-Tropez? So those are your 3 options. Please spam the chat now and we'll come back to that at the end. Okay. moving on, what can be done? Big burning questions here. I've organised this slide into the 4 Ps model. I'll just go through them one by one. Lots of these things we've heard already today, but I think they're worth reiterating. So firstly, prevent. So major thing here is policy around payment. Can we as a society make it illegal to pay ransoms? And the US Treasury have taken a sort of first step towards this by issuing advisories on those facilitating ransom payments, especially when the criminal groups involved are subject to US sanctions. Really interesting one to watch there. Secondly, pen test tools that I mentioned are used. So Cobalt Strike is a licensed piece of software. Lots of cracked versions are in circulation and used. So maybe there's something that can be done around that. It might be quite challenging, but food for thought potentially. Pursue, so yeah, as Matt described elegantly from Microsoft, so lots of coordinated response here. Hats off to Microsoft for the work against TrickBot and other examples. So better data sharing kind of really needs to underpin a lot of this. And ultimately, if those things can lead to prosecution, that's going to have the greatest effect. But there's a whole load of challenges with that. Thirdly, protect. Do the basics right. I'm sure everyone's heard it thousands of times. It doesn't hurt to hear it again. It's one of those things that's very easy to say. It can be quite tricky to do, when there's competing priorities and so on. But yeah, the top exploits used by ransomware gangs are the VPN bugs, OpenRDP, basic patching around those is going to go a long way. Segregation and management of auth and protecting privileged accounts, all that good stuff. Lastly, prepare. So ultimately, everything needs to flow down from board level to get the appropriate resources in place. This stuff needs to be recognised as a risk, and also a recovery plan really needs to be exercised, tested. You need to know that your backups work, and following US and other guidance around backups, the 3-2-1 model, really, really important. The number of incident response cases our team have seen where backup has been recovery has been impossible from backups is it says there's a problem. So moving on then, just some conclusions then. So ransom and extortion has grown to comfortably over $1 million a year industry for the major criminal groups doing this, and publishing on blogs has really changed the game, allowed attackers to ramp up pressure, and it's reaping rewards for them. Payment of ransoms is fueling the cycle, and I think we're going to see a range of thorny policy issues coming around ransom payment. Expect to see more groups doing this, more focus from law enforcement, more indictments. But I guess the question is, will we see any change? With that, that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much. And Reid, I don't know if the numbers are in, as it were, in terms of A, B, and C.
The numbers are in, and I can reveal the top one was B, don't pay, but closely followed by A. So actually a bit of a split there. Yeah.
Okay.
I think actually we're going to have a big debate on Slack later. So please join up and have your say there, because I'm guessing there isn't a right answer, maybe? I don't want to put you on the spot, James.
The party line is B, but I suspect in a lot of situations, it's almost like a last resort for some of these companies where they can't recover. But yeah, certainly the party line is B.
Also, reassured that you focused on Maze and Cobalt Strike, because that's in my assignment. So I've done something right. But thank you, James, for that really interesting whistle-stop tour of ransomware. We're now going to move on to our next segment. We have a short video from our academic partner, Gloucestershire College, on what they've been doing.
Okay, welcome back. Here we are. So we're nearly at the end of the show, but now we've got a chance to ask some questions to the panel. Thank you so much for all the questions that have been coming in. It's been amazing, actually. We've had lots and lots of questions, lots of people asking some really insightful things. So we'll start off. If I can start with you, James. First, we've got a question here. Do we really understand how to work safely from home? And are there any emerging threats specifically related to mass remote working, do you think? Because obviously that's been the big trend for this year, remote working.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, there has been some kind of, I guess, more anecdotal and survey-based evidence about data breaches resulting from working from home, and that's probably maybe the main concern at the moment. I think it's going to take a bit longer until we know the full extent of this, probably into next year, until we have a clearer idea of whether there are specific attack paths that become more exploited. But yeah, that's kind of where I think we're at with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been such an interesting year, isn't it, with everybody moving to working remotely and the different ways of working that are emerging because of that. I'm now going to move to Lauren. Lauren, great to have you back. So, as a young person, do you think that young people in general are becoming more concerned or aware about the information they share online and the threat from cyber criminals, which is apparent, but, you know...
Yeah, so it definitely depends on the person, but obviously, as a society, and being in the midst of teenagers, I do feel that we aren't really aware, and the PSHE lessons that we have on the dangers of the internet, we aren't really paying attention enough, and it's kind of disregarded. I think it's also down to peer pressure, that you have like a lot of friends now that do share a lot of their information publicly, and you might feel peer pressured into exposing yourself when you don't actually really want to, and it's down to so many people now just sharing their lives quite publicly.
I mean, it's such a different time, isn't it, Reid? You and I didn't have an online presence until way past my teens, I think, and didn't have a mobile phone until, 20s.
You don't look that old. If I can sort of go to our next question, thanks for that. And this one I think is for Jeremy first and then Sarah. So in your experience, to what extent do you see potentially competing companies sharing their threat intelligence between each other to help reduce cybercrime as a whole? And is there an opportunity there? So first to you, Jeremy, and then Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, interesting question. So I guess sharing of threat intelligence, sharing of knowledge in general is critical to the industry success, actually. I think, was the question specifically about competing with their threat intelligence? I don't have any experience of that, but certainly from a platform perspective and a product vendor, it is critical that we can get this information out and we can actually share it. I know Don at SecureWorks uses features of our platform to share SecureWorks' threat intelligence to their customers and to the wider community. But I think, it's sort of viewed a little bit like treasure as well. And given the data security constraints around it and the issues with sharing other people's information, there's challenges in there too.
So maybe a difference between the platform and the data. Sarah, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I can actually share that Microsoft, for example, actively do share information with the likes of Facebook, Twitter, etc. So actually one of the things which our digital crimes unit do, touching on what Matt was talking about, so we actually look through the dark web, we look at different domains. So we have an obligation to shut down any sites which are being used for child exploitation, for example. So that's something we actively collaborate on, through those sort of search engines and how those sites are being utilised. Also talking to our customers, there is more activity, particularly, as you say, customers who might be in a competitive environment. So if I touch on financial services as a good example, so we're seeing a lot more collaboration and sharing with like banks, for example. So when we're talking about active threats, so one of the things that they want to be looking at specifically So they want to know, is this attack against the financial sector? Is it attack against them in particular? Or is this something we're seeing across the market? So I actually think this is really, really positive because actually it helps our intelligence by getting that feedback and understanding about what's going on. And I think ultimately it's really important that we have as much sharing and collaboration as possible.
That's really great, given that there's quite a lot of dark, negative messages. To have a positive focus, that sounds really important for the future. Chris, is there any more questions?
Yeah, I was going to stick with you, if I may, Sarah, and ask, because it's interesting. We know that there's the ongoing threat from cyber criminals to major enterprises. Do we think that the boards of those major enterprises, the CEOs, the senior executives, are really taking those threats seriously these days, and seriously enough, should we say? Are they starting to listen more to the CISOs and the cyber leaders in the businesses, do we think, or is it still an ongoing battle to really communicate that up into the senior echelons of business?
Well, actually, I think whenever there's a major incident or a crisis, I think about where's the opportunity, where's the positives that we can take from this. So actually, when I think about the situation that we're in with COVID, we've been arguably in a crisis management situation for 7, 8, 9+ months. And to enable people to have remote working en masse and at short notice, it's kind of brought cybersecurity into the limelight, if you like, because it's not about just enabling people to work remotely. As we touched on, they also have to be secure, they need to be safe, and they also need to be productive. So many companies weren't really set up for remote working, so they've had to change their policies on the fly. Many companies, let's say, didn't allow your own device, so they've had to change the policy to enable bring your own device and those type of things. So a lot of those policies and processes have to be refined on the fly. But I think it's certainly brought it to the forefront. And what we've also seen, our CEO, Satya Nadella, he actually observed that we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. So there's that mass acceleration to the cloud. If they weren't already moving to the cloud, they're accelerating that. And one of the other things is around that sharing and collaboration. How do you share data through likes of Teams or Zoom or whatever it is you're using, again, safely and securely? So I actually think, ironically, of an event of this magnitude, it's actually brought out so many positives that we can take from this.
Absolutely. I think the opportunities for big business to really embrace the new way of working, and in a secure way as well. We're going to see some really interesting times over 2021, possibly. And the need for really strong technical leadership and secure technical leadership as well has been thrust into the boardroom. So that's a positive takeaway, I guess, from the challenges of 2020. Reid.
Chris, I've got one more question here that's come in. It's maybe a little bit more philosophical and sort of future looking, but it builds on the sort of technology and the sort of AI. Will humans always be in the loop, or will the machine replace them in cyber? Maybe, I don't know, James, if we go to you first, maybe we'll see what all the panel think.
It's a tough one. Ultimately, I hope humans are in the loop and remain in the loop for many decades to come. But yeah, who knows what the future holds, I guess. I think, there's certainly a lot of talk about more automation, more AI going into a lot more processes. But I think, ultimately, you still need human input. But both sides of the coin are going to be doing it, right, on attack and defend. So that's another factor to consider.
Lauren, maybe what are your thoughts on that in terms of humans and AI?
So I feel like humans are always needed, and to build the robots, we do actually need the humans to be here for the robots, even if they are to build the future robots. And it is kind of our world, and we are kind of shaping it. So I do feel like even though robots might be a bigger part of it, we still do have to kind of tell them how to function and tell them what to do.
Thanks for that, Lauren. Yeah, Jeremy, if I could just come to you. I know that you're a big machine learning guy. So how do we sort of avoid the machine learning sort of taking over and keep the humans in the loop?
Yeah, I mean, I think we like to think of it as augmented intelligence, actually, where the product is the combination of the analytics and the person, and they have to work together in a sort of a harmonious whole to be successful. And I think going forwards into the future, the sort of abstraction level of decision making will change. There's more and more data, there's better and better analytics, and the types of decisions that people actually have to make will just be at a different level of magnitude, I think, but they'll still be in the loop. I firmly believe that. Or we've done terribly wrong.
So we've got to keep humans in the loop in the decision-making place, and we've got to keep it positive as well. Chris, anything else?
Yeah, so next year we're going to be looking at one of our events, looking at probably augmented intelligence and artificial intelligence, machine learning, those sorts of technologies. So check that out next year for sure. One more from me. So going back to you, James, and if I may, we're seeing a significant spate of so-called ransomware as a service attacks on major corporations such as Garmin. And you touched on this earlier on. But do you think national governments should be doing more to shut down those providers of ransomware as a service? And actually, this is a nation problem rather than an industry problem.
Oof, that's a loaded one. I think these problems are being worked on. They're just really thorny to make progress on, given where a lot of these cyber criminals base their operations. And the measures that they put in place to protect themselves from pursuance. But yeah, I certainly think coordinated action on a number of fronts is needed. Policy around making ransom payment illegal is really interesting, and whether we see that in the UK is going to be interesting to see as well to really stop the flow. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Well, it was a deliberately very, very thorny one, as you say, but that's why we're here. But thank you so much. I think that's all the time we've got for questions now. So thank you to all the panel for being so engaging. Thank you to Lauren as well. Thank you so much for answering our questions. Thank you to you for asking the questions and for engaging throughout the whole of this afternoon. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, then please do come back for next year. CyNam 21.1 will be the early part of next year. We'll be sending out more details about all of that going forward. We will be looking for sponsors. We will be looking for speakers. So if you'd like to get involved, then please do make your presence known, either by emailing one of the directors or through the website. Otherwise, thank you so much for being a part of today's event. We hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you to our magnificent panel, to Lauren, to Reed, to these wonderful studios at DRPG, and good night.